Hi, want to make a quick video here. Just got this new Grizzly G0765. It's a 7x14 benchtop lathe. Runs off 110 volt power, has a power feed, variable drive, 650 watt motor, and it comes with a host of accessories that I'd like to show you. So this is just going to be a quick little overview. Okay, just try to give you a little operator's eye view here of the whole lathe. So you can see here at the headstock we have it's variable speed, so we have basically a potentiometer to turn the lathe on and dial in exactly what RPMs you like. Kind of a neat feature. Behind the headstock there's a slow and fast, or a low gear and high gear switch. And then also there is the engagement clutch for the power feed. The lead screw. On the actual carriage, it works really well, and it seems to hold pretty good tolerance without too much backlash in the gears. You can of course adjust and correct for any of that happens to come along. So it's one of those things that you can make it nice and rigid and tight. And it's, I believe it's 40 thousandths per revolution on the cross feed, and yeah, same for the compound. The compound as it comes, you have to back it all the way off before you can adjust its angle. It's currently at 60 degrees, 30 on the little dial here, for whatever that's worth. The tool post, I have it buckled on here. The tool post is what's called a four-way tool post. It has a little notch that you can, in theory, have 4 different tools and switch between them. It's okay. The one issue with it is that to set the height of your tools, you need to manually go in there with shim stock and raise or lower the height as necessary. Quick change tool posts and other types of gadgetry fix that, and that's going to be one of the upgrades I get ASAP. It comes with this chuck. This is a 3-jaw chuck, self-centering. It is a 3-inch 3-jaw chuck with what I believe is a 5/8 through hole. So it's not the biggest, but it works just fine for general things. I'll show you the upgraded chuck I also bought. This tailstock is one of the things I really liked about it as far as features go when I selected this lathe. It's very beefy compared to other lathes in this class, and it's nice and smooth and tight, and it has the quick release, quick locking levers on the quill lock and the ways. So it's really nice, and it's very solid, and it so far has done everything I need a tailstock to do. You'll also notice it has an oiler here, which are located all over the lathe, and that's kind of a neat deal that it allows you to maintain it so easily. On this side of the headstock, this is the gearbox, and right now it doesn't really look like much, although it does show you this is wear on the thread dial to engage the half-nut lever when you're cutting threads, and then this is an actual list of the gears you'll need to cut threads or to switch it to power feed. And I use one of these T-handle hex wrenches. The lathe does come with all of the tools that you'd ever need to work on it and do any of the adjustments on it. I'll show you those in a minute. But these T-handle wrenches make it so much easier and faster, and I can keep them all together and don't lose them. As you can see here, we have the gearbox. This is also the spindle. That's the electronic tachometer, and it actually measures these little fins on the spindle to give you a pretty accurate measure of how fast the spindle's moving. This is the banjo here. There's a nut you loosen so that when you pull these gears off, you can adjust how they all 3 or 4 mesh together when you put, say, bigger gears on there. It is not as easy as some of the nicer, bigger, more expensive American lathes or import that have a gearbox and you just flip a few levers. But it does work okay, and it actually is not as much of a pain as you might think. So, and there's also, this right here is the clutch that engages or disengages the lead screw. So you can run it with the lead screw completely in neutral, or you can run it with the lead screw in reverse to cut left-handed threads, or you can run it as standard. So this, like I said, this lathe comes with a host of accessories, and it's actually one of the things that put the Grizzly model kind of ahead of a lot of the competitors as far as the total overall value go. It comes with, as I showed you, the tool post, the 3-jaw chuck, the nice tailstock, a nicer motor than many of the other lathes in its class. I believe the Harbor Freight version of this is only a 350 watt. I may be wrong on that, but it's definitely not the 650 watt as boasted by this guy. You also get things such as this. This is a steady rest that you can balance between the ways of the lathe to hold a longer piece of material so that if it does stick out very far from the chuck, it'll keep it in balance and you can work on the end of it. Something that really stretches the abilities of a lathe of this size. Another neat option you get is a faceplate. This you bolt on in place of the chuck, and it can hold flat materials, say a piece of stock like that. You could bolt that on, put it between some work holding tools, and you could face that off and get a nice, true, perfect flat finish on that if you wanted to. You could also turn this, in theory, you could turn that to where it has a round profile on the outside. So this is a really neat option. I have not played with it yet, but it is a cool thing that they throw in there, and has a lot of different uses as well. So that's something that you see on wood lathes, and it's also something that some of the older lathes at the turn of the century and before would use that in conjunction with a center. Now that's the number 3 Morse taper center, and that's for the headstock, which the lathe comes with this center. It's a dead center, and it also comes with a number 2 for the tailstock. So you can turn between centers, which is one of the original ways that any lathe was used. And these are actually pretty nice. They are ground to a very fine point, which is really handy. I like putting this one in the tailstock to adjust tool height, because this right here, this very fine sharp point, is exactly where your center line of your lathe is, so you can adjust the cutting edge of the tool right to that point. Very handy. As I had mentioned, the lathe does come with all of the tools you'll need to do necessary upgrades, modifications, well, not upgrades, but modifications, repairs, or basically just the adjusting and upkeep of it, really. So yeah, you've got these are all metric, of course. These are open-ended box wrenches, and they'll fit every single nut on the lathe. And then there's also, for every one of the different sized Allen keys, you get a set. And this is one of those keychain sets with the little spring retainers on them, and I just yank these off when I'm using them. And the problem with that is you can lose them real easy. So I actually have a set of these Harbor Freight metric. I've got metric and standard, but these T-handled wrenches are just perfect for $6. Far easier to not lose, and you get a better hold on it. But you do get these, so you know that you will always have the exact wrenches around, even if you can't find your other better set. So that's a nice touch that they throw in. Makes it handy. When I purchased this lathe, I've also gotten some upgrades as well. So the first one is, this is just a drill chuck with a number 2 Morse taper. Fits in the tailstock, so you can actually drill on the center line of the lathe. Really handy. It works very well. And this is I actually just picked this up from Harbor Freight. It is, gosh, I think $15. In addition to the dead centers that came with the lathe, I also got a live center, and this has a ball bearing in the rear, so it fits in the tailstock, and it will turn with the work. This is the 4-jaw chuck. It differs from the 3-jaw in that each one of these move independently, if you're not familiar with how they work. It can be a little slower to operate because you do need to sit there and dial in the work on each of these axes by turning each chuck and then measuring it with one of these to determine how out of concentricity your workpiece is. I got this chuck for a couple reasons. One, it does allow for a much higher standard of precision. You can get it down, you can get your workpiece down to within 1/1000th of itself on the lathe. The other thing is that this is a much bigger chuck. This is 5 inches in diameter, whereas the one on the lathe is 3, and it has a bigger through hole in the bore. So, like I said, the one on the lathe is, I believe, 5/8 of an inch, or whatever metric equivalent. This is, I believe, 1 inch. Which allows you to put finer pieces of work. You can actually hold them all the way in the chuck. You can have them inside the chuck, and even going up into the headstock if they're big enough to fit in the spindle, which is another point of rigidity. This also probably weighs, I don't know, 30 pounds. It is a chunk of ground and hardened steel. So without getting too far into any specific project at this point, I'm just going to kind of wrap this up here. Like I said, this is just a brief overview. I have a project that I'm going to start shooting basically right now that'll be its own entire introduction video to how this lathe operates and how we can do some operations on it. But it is, it's pretty handy, and I'll show you at least, we'll check something up. I got this little cut-off scrap of 61 aluminum, and we'll just throw it here into the chuck. I don't know why the chuck's being stiff all of a sudden. We'll chuck that up. Now, if this was a part that, if that was not waste, or if this was a part that I'd already had operations on it, I actually have some pieces of brass shim stock I'd use right in there to keep it from marring a soft workpiece, because those are pretty hard jaws. And then I'll show you here. We'll set our spindle to forward. We're going to open up the latch. So this is our safety emergency stop latch. You have to flip it up, press the green button, and that gets us to 0. And then make sure we're in low gear. And it doesn't matter what our lead screw's set at, as long as it's set to something and not just floating in there, it could chip. And then we just turn our little knob, and away we go. And you can see, as I turn the knob more, you can see it. A little RPM gauge there. It's very, very easy to dial in a pretty close RPM. Though it doesn't have a gearbox to set the speed of the lead screw, it also doesn't require spindle changes or belt changes to correct for speeds and speed direction. So in low gear here, see if we can get it up to 893 is what we're spinning at. I think it's set up to 1100 RPMs in the low gear, so 905. So that's an overview of this lathe. Like I said, it's not super comprehensive. This is just kind of a quick overview, a little bench top review, tabletop review, as it were. I just wanted to kind of display the features of this lathe. It seems like there's not a ton of third-party information about this. There's what's on Grizzly's website, and then I found there's a couple videos on YouTube that are pretty helpful. A couple websites with some pretty helpful information. Minilathe, I believe it is .com. Frank Hoose on YouTube, Hoose. But there's not a ton of kind of I don't want to say subjective, because there's a lot of opinion about these lathes on the internet, and that's where it gets a little complicated. There's a lot of discussion boards and forums that seem to think all of these won't cut styrofoam, and it seems to be pretty accurate. I've already done threading on it. I've done boring. I've cut stainless steel. I've parted. I'm trying to think what else I've done. I mean, I've done most major operations on the lathe that any garage hobbyist such as myself would need. It meets my needs, and it's really fun. I've got a lot of projects that I'm really looking forward to doing with this. So one of those I'm going to start here, and we're we're gonna go through that together. Maybe use the knurling tool and do some aluminum cutting. Beyond that, yeah, this is just the Grizzly G0765 7x14 lathe. So thank you for watching.